Hi there, and welcome to the Leaky Bucket podcast. I'm your host, Ian Morgan, and this is the financial performance podcast for entrepreneurs looking to get a better understanding of their numbers, to plug the leaks in their business, and to move from surviving to thriving. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Leaky Bucket podcast. Today, we're carrying on with the new format with myself and Sam here joining us. Sam, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so first things first, it's on to the leak of the week. And the leak is around about some challenges that we had with security and email and Office 365 in particular. Now, we use LastPass throughout our organization. And obviously LastPass recommends passwords. It does combinations of lowercase, uppercase, numbers, special characters, and so on. But what we actually ended up with was, I think it was 2 clients who received an email pertaining to be from us. And then when we looked into it, it actually seemed like it did come from our servers. Now, it's commonplace that emails, not necessarily for us specifically, but for companies, emails get replicated. But often if you just hover over the email address, then actually you can just see that it's joeblogs at gmail.com or yahoo.com or something like that. And it's pretty obvious that it's fake, but this was actually coming from us. Our learning point, I think, from this was that once we got IT onto it, we'd obviously secured everything down, changed passwords, and actually it became obvious the severe differences in terms of the time it takes to hack an 8-character password versus a 16-character password. From memory, I think 8-character, the weakest type, if you don't have too many combinations, the weakest type is about 4 minutes. Going to 16 characters is something like 4 million years or something like that. Now, obviously, with hackers having computer-generating passwords happening all the time, then they can speed up that process to a degree, which is why they can achieve it within 4 minutes. So I think our key learning here really was to up our password security from make sure we don't allow 8-character passwords, up those to 16 characters. And you want to add or anything you found that you learned from this as well?
Nothing specifically to add in terms of learnings. I think what we've done previously is we'd had to be completely different. There weren't any that could be the same. We were significantly above what LastPass have as their standard percentage for what they would consider good to keep your. I think the only thing that was lacking there, as you mentioned, but it doesn't really flag necessarily within LastPass and affect your score, is quite how many digits or symbols, numbers, etc. that you need within a password in order to make that as secure as possible. And I think a standard mine were above 16 anyway. I actually have 20 on mine as a standard. But I think across the team, we had some that were significantly less. So although they were classed as secure passwords, actually, when it comes to hacking, they're quick to hack. So we've had to overhaul that within the company as to how many digits, symbols, etc. you need within a password in order for that to be classified as secure.
Yeah, and I think a key learning from this is, even though we were using some good practices within the industry, obviously they could be improved upon. We actually contained that. There was a couple of emails that went out that I don't think caused anybody any significant difficulties apart from going, oh, this is a bit of an odd email. But obviously we implemented our sort of emergency plan in such a situation. But the key learning from this was to go, actually, people want that data. All of us, all business owners and all humans, actually, we've all got personal data that hackers want to be able to get hold of. And therefore we're not exempt or immune from this. That you might think, oh, it's only big organizations like an Amazon, whatever, but they probably have the highest levels of security. But actually, smaller organizations are probably a little bit more vulnerable because they just don't have the technology, the infrastructure, and possibly even the cash to invest in the high level of security of something like Amazon or Google, and that may do. And I think that element of just upping the level of passwords, testing obviously our implementation plan and making sure how that worked, I think they're key learnings, and that actually we're stronger at the back of it going into the future.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. I mean, the brilliant thing as such that comes out of it, if you can take a positive from it, is the fact that it was dealt with so quickly and that we haven't had a breach in terms of any personal data or anything, which obviously could be the case for a company. So that was a great thing to come out of it, that actually as soon as we were alerted to it, it was dealt with. There wasn't any breach there in terms of any personal data, and our security process has got more improved. And for passwords in general, they are a lot more secure and a lot stricter on what we expect as a company.
Brilliant. So moving on from the leak of the week, we move on to the epic win of the week. Now, I believe, Sam, you've got something to share around the epic win of the week, and it's something coming from your element of the business.
Yeah, so for a while we wanted the team to experience similar to what we do in terms of the fact that if we've got school runs to do, etc. So having a team in the Philippines and having a team in the UK, there was a degree of complexity in bringing that in, and indeed there's still a little bit around that in terms of our Filipino team. But we're currently trialing Flexi across certain members of the team to see how that goes, and so far it is going really well. So effectively what we've done is we've got a program that we already had that monitors production levels, etc., and capacity within each team member. So we decided whether we could use that to further what we were doing with it. On the whole, we use it for checking that nobody's sort of overworked, which is initially what we brought it in for, but obviously it is a handy feature for ensuring that the team are doing the hours they're meant to be doing, and the work production levels are where we expect. So that actually has hours on it of production. So we thought we'd use that. And actually what we've done for our team members that are trialing it currently is we've gone, you can work the hours that you like, as long as your meetings and things that are specific to your role are conducted and are sorted, then actually you can choose your working hours. And you just use this program to ensure that you're where you need to be in terms of the hours that you're supposed to work. So they don't have to be constantly checking in with me of, whether they can have the afternoon off because they've got the dentist to go to or the dog's at the vet or whatever. As long as they're pre-sorting things beforehand and the team members within they're aware of contact, then actually the hours that they work are down to them, and they just keep an eye on the system to make sure they're logging in enough hours as such on there, so they don't have to physically log into it and put their hours. It just naturally monitors it.
Brilliant. What's been the initial early feedback from the team members who are trialing?
So I think it's been really handy. So we did a mix across the team members of who were trialing it out of different pods, different positions, some people that work from home, some people that work in the office, to get a rounded view of it. And it's really positive feedback. One of our team members has got children, and therefore there is a period of time. For another team member that's trying it, they've got preparations for a wedding, and they had some bits that they'd already asked for permission to have time off and make it up at other points, but it just meant that they didn't feel this pressure to be back in, if you like, even though there hadn't been any from our end. They had said that they just felt like, oh, I can't be too long because I am meant to be working, sort of thing as such, and some of their preparation bits. So I think the fact that they could just know that actually it doesn't matter how long they were, as long as over the week their hours are what they should be, and that really adhere to any meetings they've got or any bits of work that need to be sorted are sorted within the timescales expected, then actually those hours were completely movable in whatever suited them.
Brilliant. And obviously there's been quite a degree of research that you've done. I've been aware of you doing leading up to testing and launching this trial that you've got at the moment. What are some of the pitfalls? I'm thinking sort of our listeners, right? And most of them are going to be business owners, and you go, oh, great, it sounds great that I could add flexibility, but what if like nobody turns up to work? What if nobody works the hours they're meant to work and productivity drops and all of these things? What did you come across as the pitfalls, and what have you put in place in order to minimize the impact of those and make sure that we're getting the right levels of outcome?
Yeah, so effectively the program we use, it was called Active Track, and that was already monitoring productivity-wise capacity within an individual or within a pod, which was really helping us home in on our metrics. It also helps the team member know where they're at with bits. We've had a team member previously that consistently offered to take on other bits that, if somebody said, I've got a bit too much of this going on, can anybody do this? Or, we're quarterly reviewing, we've got rocks coming up and you've got somebody that's consistently going, oh, I can do that rock, I'll have time for that, I can do that. We felt that person was overworked but couldn't see it themselves when talking. So the program was initially brought into practice for that, and it worked really well. And actually that person was overworked and we were able to use that in order for her to see that. And we've kept it since then and used it in terms of that capacity element. But this has brought in a different dynamic to it because we've never really looked at it in terms of productivity as such. That comes out of it, it does have those as different. And this time, for the fact of using it for Flexi, the team are looking at their productive hours. So it takes into account any time that the computer is on but not being used. And you can see the difference of what's productive and what's not productive work. We've had with different team members in order to work out if it's monitoring fairly or not, because we use Zoom. So we have meetings, there's idle time within meetings. So we've agreed, and that's partly what the trial is looking at, we've agreed what would be a suitable amount of hours for each role based on how much time they use being on Zoom, etc. And therefore it does pick some of it up as productive, but it's not active productive because they're not pressing keys and changing between programs on the computer. The only aspect that I think we still need to overcome within it for our Filipino team members, they have their own laptops and therefore their hours on active track are set on there, so it only monitors during their working hours. Whereas our UK team members, they have a MacBook supplied to them and all the time. So with it being flexi, it can pick up whatever hours they're on and off. That can't be the case with our Filipino team members because it would pick up their personal working, etc., which one would be extremely unfair on them and two would skew the results. So I'm working hard with our Filipino team members at the moment to come up with a different process for that. As you'll see in the next one of going into the pick of the week, we hope to move into row at some point. And therefore having that element of knowing exactly what our metrics are is really important. That really provides that in terms of looking at quite where productivity is and quite how much work somebody can take on or whether they are overworked.
Brilliant. So you already touched upon row there. So I think it's a good step to move towards the pick of the week. And obviously you just dropped in row. What on earth is?
So row is a working environment, which means if you're concentrating on whatever you want to call it, that's assigned to them for their role. Now, other people that are doing the same role as them might have exactly the same scorecard. On the other hand, they might have metrics scorecard that is individual to that person because one person might work a lot quicker than the other. Salaries might be different between them. There could be multiple reasons. But effectively, the idea of row is that somebody has some metrics, a scorecard that's assigned to them that they need to achieve. And actually, if they achieve that in our team members, we have a 35-hour working week. So you could go, well, if they achieve it in 35 hours, then that's dead on what their hours are. And effectively, that's what you'd be looking to achieve to make sure your metrics are around that point, because you shouldn't be expecting somebody to have to work more and not necessarily under. However, once you've got your metrics down, if you've got somebody that is exceptionally good at their job and they're quick and they produce good results, you're not having to go in and correct things or change it, etc. But they manage to achieve that in 28 hours. Fantastic for them. That's their week done. They've done it in 28 hours. That was the metrics or the scorecard that you gave them and they've achieved it. Now, there could be the case that somebody has to work over that in order to achieve their metrics. And then I think you'd need to be looking and going, is there a problem with your metrics? probably not, or there shouldn't be if you've tested them that much, but it is good to look into it. Is that person not achieving it because there's some training elements there? Are they not achieving it because actually there's some areas there that you need to look into in terms of whether they are doing their work, whether they're getting it done?
Brilliant. So it sounds like in a results-only work environment, that's quite a shift to move from a traditional time being exchanged for money type environment. Now, obviously, we've been advocates as a business in terms of clients working with us that we're not exchanging time for money. So I think we've got a good insight as to how that can work in terms of a business selling outcomes. Do you think it's somewhere that we're likely to head towards, or do you think it's somewhere that, as we're testing flexi time, it helps us keep us focused in terms of maybe just improving the scorecards that we've currently got for our team members?
I think it's a case of see how it goes, to be honest. So I definitely see some really good value in both flexi and row. Flexi, 100%, we wanted to install that into the company. I wanted that for the team members. And actually, if you're concerned about installing something like that, then I'd probably question whether you've got the right team members, because actually your team members should be aligned to your core values and they should want the best for themselves and for the company. And therefore you should have, in my opinion, there should be little issues with it. Not none, because that's not realistic, but you should have good team members that align to your core values that you know would get their hours done and would still work, etc. You're not going to have those problems. Row is slightly more difficult for me in terms of the fact that you've got to make sure you've got your metrics where you need them, because you're offering a certain salary for these completed. So if you've missed any bits, it could cause you problems. And if you have something else that pops up that's a one-off task, nobody's going to want to take that on to do for free. So effectively, you're asking that person to do overtime without being paid any extra. So you really need to make sure that you've got things, really honed down to what those metrics are. And that's what I hope to achieve through going through the process at the moment. But I think it is a long process. I'm expecting it to be sort of, around the 18-month mark before we're ready to move into looking at a results-only working environment, because I think those metrics are just so important to make sure you've got them. And it does need some working around whether it's quite the right decision for the company, considering that those one-off tasks are no longer going to somebody, have you got time to fit this in? Because that person doesn't really work 35 hours anymore. They work whatever they need to get that role done. So actually, if they're going to be able to get it done in 30 hours, why would they want to take a task on for you that's now going to take them to 33 hours, 34 hours?
Brilliant. So it sounds like there's some mad good positives with the results only work environment, but there's a fair few challenges that we need to be able to overcome. And it sounds to me like, I believe we've got a strong culture, but I think that culture has to be really, really, really strong in order for a results only work environment to be successful in the long term.
Yeah, I think it can definitely be successful. It's just whether it causes you some stress with those one-off tasks that come up, and ensuring that those are completed and working out how much you're going to pay somebody to do those bits if something does crop up, sort of thing. We've had an element recently where we had team members that we had to get rid of. And over that period, other team members did have to take on a bulk of the work that was from there. I think under flexi, that's not so much. You're going to have to offer something to those people. Yes, there is a degree of the fact that we have an extremely good culture and I want to help out. I think it would be naive and unfair on the team to expect them to chip into that much stuff without getting something extra for it.
Brilliant. Before we move on and go to the next section, I just want to do a shout out to the listeners. We want to be able to bring both me and Sam to this section is the fact that actually you guys can be interactive with us. So you can bring your questions to us and we will then consider those questions and play around with them and see what we can do relating to them. So if you've any questions that you want to fire in relating to the subjects that we've had on discussion here today, so such as the results only work environment, flexi time, culture we've mentioned, or anything else that we've mentioned in previous episodes, or even the fact that you want to bring something new to the table, then send in those questions and we are more than happy to then review and play around with them and see what we can do to bring you good quality answers and make this just a little bit more interactive for you guys. So moving on, we have the buzz of the week. Now, happening recently, and actually this has happened numerous months in a row, but yet again, we've had the Bank of England raising interest rates by 1/4 of a percentage point in terms of their aim, realistically, is to, by raising those interest rates, is to curb spending and bring down inflation. I think in the 12 months to the end of July, inflation based on the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, was running at near enough 7%.
Now the business target is 2%.
So clearly we're massively above where that's at. And I think many people are feeling the pinch of that inflation and the cost of living going up. And we obviously have cost of living crisis as it's being defined. But the interesting part was that relationship between, obviously, everyone's like, well, the government are pushing interest rates up again. That means my mortgage is going to go up. Isn't it bad already? But obviously, the actual efforts of the government or the Bank of England in that and curbing spending is that inflation will come down and things will then become back under control. The thing is, how do we bring that into business? And what effect are we likely to see in terms of moving forward, in terms of the effect of the interest rates, but also the effect of inflation, whether that continues to keep going at the rates that it's at? What's your thoughts?
So my thoughts in terms of the businesses is that I think it's a bit of a snowball effect. And I think we had this discussion a few episodes ago as well, slightly, where it does snowball in terms of increases happen within one company. For example, we increase our accountancy fees to our clients. Well, in fact, it goes a step before that. And we've had to do that actually recently, but we've had some of our programs that we use have increased their costs and we pass those on to our clients. So although we haven't increased our fees for our accountancy side, the fees have gone up for clients because the programs that we use have gone up and I think that does have a little bit of a snowball effect that happens within any company. So our clients will be looking at that and have an increase there, and they'll be seeing how they can work that out within their costs to ensure that they're where they want to be and still making enough money off jobs, etc. So they might need to increase costs within their company. And I just think that there is this snowball effect. I understand where the government's coming from in terms of curbing spending, etc. Do I think it'll curb spending? No, not really.
So actually, before we go on that, what do you think is actually, like, let's play with government here, right? And obviously it's easily done, but actually it's not easily implemented, right? What ideas would you have that you think that actually would curb spending and help bring that inflation back down? So obviously, the more people keep spending, then actually the more the inflation does keep going up, because it's just the supply and demand game. Yeah. So what would you be doing? What would you be considering?
Stopping people allowing to take debt for a start. I think it's be more realistic with it. I can't remember where I was. This was months ago when we were doing the extension on our property, and we were looking for general bits like the flooring and all sorts of little sort of bits like that. And every single shop we went in, every single shop had 0% finance on offer, like everywhere. And I think at one point we went into a shop that was simply like food and things like that, and they had it on in there.
Even if you go and spend, I think, Amazon now, and you spend more than £100, you can take 3 installments to pay that off. Do you think that means that people think they can afford things that they can't afford, and therefore that causes the demand to be higher than the supply, and that causes the inflation effect, and then that causes this knock-on impact in terms of then actually interest rates have to go up in order to curb the spending? So it's the short-term finance options available now on things with £100 that cause some of that issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think it has a huge impact on it. I think not only does it have an impact, but I think actually it is making it harder for people that are a bit financially tight or even those that weren't initially but become financially tight because they take out so many things that actually they shouldn't be taking out because they can't afford it once you have multiple of these, and interest rates then go up, mortgages go up, etc. And all of a sudden, all these things they've taken out become unaffordable, and they become in a financial crisis themselves, and actually can end up in positions where they end up on some sort of finance repayment thing that's had to come in, or they can end up losing properties and so forth. And I think actually it is all too easy to do. I mean, we actually have a family member that this sort of happened to. They didn't lose a property, but they did get themselves into an extensive amount of financial difficulty because realistically they didn't really understand quite the impact of taking out all the finance they were taking. And things like purchasing a laptop, purchasing a washing machine. So yeah, definitely. I've actually got a family member, we've got a family member, I should say, that got themselves into financial difficulty for that exact reason. So they didn't own a property, so they haven't lost a house, sort of in terms like that, but it did have a massive impact on them. They had to have all their finances consolidated, and they've had to go on a plan that lasts, I think it's 5 years. And over that time, everything gets monitored for them. So they literally can't do anything without asking for permission to have whatever it might be, so that currently they need to get a vehicle and they need to save up some money for that, etc. So they have to go to them and ask if they can, make a smaller payment or have a little extra kept out of their salary in terms of putting some money aside to get that vehicle. And they understand now how the finances work, but when they were taking out all the bits, to them it just seemed like free money as such. You could have these bits, and then ultimately, months down the line, when you've got £20 a month for, the new iron that you bought or something, you've got £30 a month because you've got the washing machine, you've got £50 a month on a tumble dryer, and all these different bits all add up to the point that even shoes and things that were purchased ended up being on those at just a couple of pound a month, and it becomes unachievable in order to be able to afford it all. And I think actually we sometimes have a society where we feel we should be allowed these things. Other people can buy them, so why can't we have them? And we're not immune to it. We've certainly been in that position before where we've purchased stuff that realistically we can't afford, or you make silly purchases. There are many, many occasions where, I'd love to fly first class, absolutely love to. Or, sometimes on a flight, in fact, we recently went to Belfast for a couple of days, and I didn't pay to have the onboard suitcases or the extra legroom seats. The kids were having a bit of a moan about it because normally I would pay for it. But the reason I pay for it is because it works out financially more viable to be able to, if you pay for the extra legroom seats on certain airlines, you then get 2 handle suitcases that you can take on board, which actually means I haven't had to pay for a large suitcase to go in the hold. So I'm always looking at what's financially more viable. On this occasion, we only needed a small backpack, and therefore I did not pay for it. And the kids, but to me, wouldn't pay for something that I don't think is, 1, financially viable, or 2, worth it. I think that's where we get a little bit of an issue in society, where there's a lack of understanding, there's a lack of foresight looking into the future of how that affects. So no, I don't think it will curb spending currently. I think it will a little bit, but I think ultimately what happens is actually people will just get into more and more financial difficulty because they will take out things on finance packages.
Yeah, I think for us it was, obviously now we're a bit more financially astute when we probably took some of the, when we were younger and we took credit cards to pay for stuff that we couldn't afford. Recently, obviously, you mentioned earlier, we were doing the extension, and actually the cost of building materials, the planning, I think, from the builder in terms of what it was going to cost, obviously went substantially above the budget that we had. And we turned to 0% credit cards and bits like that in order to complete it, to be able to refinance it afterwards. And it was scary how easy it was to get thousands, tens of thousands of pounds of credit. Blink of an eye. Yeah, you can just go, oh, I'd like that one, please. And boom, there you go. Thank you very much. There's some credit. Now, obviously, it was great for us in terms of we could manage that and we had a plan and we knew what we were going to borrow and how we would sort that out and so on. But I think the fact then that somebody who doesn't know how to manage their finances could easily do the same, before you know it, you could be tens of thousands of pounds in debt, no way to repay it.
I think that's the issue. It's not necessarily having the debt, it's thinking about it actively and going, is this really the right decision? Do I really need this product, this item, whatever it is it actually needed? How am I going to pay it back? And is it worth having it for what I'm going to have to pay back and the sacrifices I'll have to make in order to pay that? And I think realistically, most of the time, the thing is, no, you don't really need it. You know, the sacrifices are quite large in order to pay back, because over that period you're paying it back, you probably can't get something else unless you take finance again, which is where, like I say, you get that snowball effect. I think I agree with you. It was very easy for us to be able to get those finance options and 0% credit cards. We knew exactly how we were going to be able to sort it with doing the remortgage, and we had a plan in place if the remortgage didn't work as well. So I think if those decisions are made, that actually you need to make sure you have those plans and stuff. But even for us having those plans, it wasn't a nice feeling to know that you've got some debt there, and that's all been sorted now, so we don't have that sort of worry. But it definitely caused a lot of worry for both of us, and I think society in general could do with better understanding, because I think it's actually, I think the government let people down in terms of the fact that they have all this stuff on offer there, but there's no proper understanding behind it or teaching to people of how this affects going forward. It's not just an effect of the decision you're making right now in this moment.
So let's leave there and let's move on the power move of the week. Sam, do you want to give us an introduction into the power move of the week? So moving on then, we're going to talk about the peek behind the curtain. So we're really looking into the peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, so obviously we've made reference to it a bit anyway. So we've talked about inflation, etc. And we also discussed earlier about the fact that we've had some increases of software that we use within the company. And with the inflation increases that have happened, those costs have had to be passed on to the client. So Ian, do you want to explain a bit more about how you've gone about that and what we've done?
Yeah, so starting last year, really, as we come out of the back of the COVID era, where we didn't change prices, and probably prior to that, we were a bit more ad hoc with when we reviewed our pricing and that sort of stuff. But we decided coming out of COVID that actually we needed to have a method where we regularly reviewed what inflation was running at and how then we pass that increasing cost to clients. And this was to go, okay, larger companies do this, but we want to do it in a way that's fair and reflective. And actually, when we looked at it this year coming into it, we're like, okay, last year we did this in June, probably need to be a bit more consistent in the timing that we'll do this. So we left it until a little bit later. But it was starting to feel the elements of going, hang on, look at all these costs that have increased over the last 12 months. I think at the time we reviewed it, I think inflation was running at 7.9. And we were certainly seeing the effects of that. We've got various software companies putting pricing up, one that completely changed the pricing model, but was going to take it from about £1,200 a month to about £3,500 a month in terms of just their whole changing of model. We've then increased in terms of wages and also increased in terms of heating costs, rent costs, and all of these things. And so we combined all that together and we looked at the effects and just went, look, most small business owners probably go, oh yeah, but I want to have close relationships. I don't want to do things that are based off of inflation increases. And I get it. But at the same point, we also got to go, but we need to be in a position where we can run a business that's being successful because we're training and helping our clients to also be successful. And our belief is that all of our clients should also be running inflation checks, looking at what their business is doing and increasing their prices onto customers. Because if you don't, you just become a mercenary to the effect of inflation. And the governments and things like that, if they don't have the impact of bringing inflation down, well, what do? Because actually, if you're not increasing your prices, you're actually losing 7%. Yeah, if your profits were 30% last time, and now actually all of your costs have gone %, then actually you're making less profit. And not all businesses are in a position that they can afford to do that. And I'd probably suggest that no business should be. Yes, you've got massive organizations that have multi-million or billion pounds worth of profits where we probably go, if you're already making 500 million, what's the effect of a couple of more million on that? But actually, if you're a small business and you're only making a few tens of thousands or a few 100,000 profit, then actually it's a big impact to be losing that. So getting the messaging is key. We knew that obviously it's not going to please everybody. And some people are going to understand, some people aren't. So it's making sure that we're clear in terms of why we're doing it, when, how, giving notice, explaining the methodology and the reasoning. And we do expect that some people potentially will lose us back of it. And we do expect that some people will maybe want to downgrade or change their services.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we should probably let the audience know there as well is the fact that actually we didn't just look at the cost element of it in terms of going, these prices are increasing, inflation's increasing, this needs passing on to the clients. Actually, we looked on the ones with the programs where they had increased their prices, and we went, what else can we offer the client to give them a choice? And that is what we've done on one of them. One of them, we decided that actually, no, this program is the best program, and actually this isn't a choice element. This is what we're using. And if you want to stay with us, then actually there will be an increase here on this. But the other program that we use, we did look elsewhere and go, there's this alternative one. It's not quite as good in terms of its features. However, it is a blooming good program, and we still advocate it. And it's included within one of the programs we already used. So it actually meant that the cost for the client wasn't going to have this massive increase that they were on the other one. And we gave it as an option to clients when we went out to them to go, look, here's the increase that's going to happen. But actually, there is this other program that you could use if you would like to trial that and see how you feel about it. And we've put everything together in terms of a training program for them in order to see what this program's like, etc. So I think that's an important thing for people to know, that actually you can increase your prices but still look at options for the clients to see whether there's anything else you can do to help them.
Yeah, certainly from my perspective, it wasn't, oh great, let's just get all of our clients paying more. And it was an element to go, okay, let's look at the packages that we deliver and how we help our clients. Can we make changes to some of the software we're using? We may make changes in terms of how energy efficient we're being, in terms of lowering our usage costs and all of those elements. But at the same point, in most countries and most economies, there is inflation. And if you're not reviewing your prices for inflation, then the time value of money, a pound today basically is not worth a pound in 50 years' time. If you don't increase what you're charging, then you will not be able to buy the same thing. You will look at it and go back, oh yeah, I remember 20 years ago when I could get a loaf of bread. It's not happening now, right? That it doesn't have the same buying power. But we still need bread. Yeah. And it's the same with most services. We still need most services or most products, but there's going to be an increased cost to them. So from a business owner's perspective, yes, you should be reviewing what you're charging and whether you've considered the cost increase in your business and whether you should be adding some kind of inflationary increase to your charges out to your customers and your clients.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Leaky Bucket podcast. I'd love it if you could help spread the message by clicking subscribe and leaving a review. Also, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can also find more info and links in the show notes below. See you next time.